got your email, Alex,
Yeah.
and we were discussing the play of NPCs,
Hmm.
and specifically those identified as an ability on someone's sheet. And the question was if, because what we had talked about last time concerned sort of proprietary aspects of those characters. If it was on
Hmm.
your sheet, do you have veto power over how someone else chooses to bring them into play? Particularly if they're bringing them in as an adversarial or at least problematic attacking ability
Hmm.
upon you. And so that could be done in two ways. One is that you uh, are, whatever it is we're calling it, attacking player. If
Hmm.
the attacking player chooses your buddy off of your sheet to be the ability that attacks you, and a really good example would be like your brother, like Alex, like Morgan's character's brother. So there
Hmm.
you are trying to do something. Someone says, "Well, I'm going to make life difficult for you." Your brother interrupts you. So I'm going to roll your brother against whatever ability you use to defend. Um, and so that's, basically they're appropriating your character on your sheet. And then a way that I actually said yes to during play, but have subsequently decided is a bad idea, is if you're the attacking player and you attack somebody using a character or whatever as an ability, and you pull it from another third party sheet because it makes a lot of sense. And the answer is no, sense or not, fiction first, my ass. Use stuff off your own sheet or their sheet. Don't start yanking. The whole board is not just a smorgasbord for you. And there needs to be structure, consequence to the fact that it's your turn. Okay, you can use stuff off their sheet, but you can also use stuff off of your sheet, no one else's. So, but with those in mind, the question is, how do you appropriate someone else's character? Or in the case of this game, it's actually someone else's ability. That's like using their own dexterity to attack them, right?
Hmm.
Um, so, Alex, do you want to summarize what you said in the email? Because I thought we'd just discuss it.
Um, well, I changed my mind. So the previous week, I was like, yes, keep them safe. But I completely changed my mind because I think that one of the strains we kind of have is the attacking player in terms of what they're introducing to the fiction. Always seems a little bit like, and of course, the easiest way to get around that is just to go, okay, just use their NPCs.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's
You can
really
think more
mostly.
motivationally instead of circumstantially.
Hmm,
Well,
hold on.
speaking personally, I never had a problem with other players using, the problematic abilities against me. I always
Mhm.
thought that was very interesting.
Yeah.
Uh, but I think there's a difference there in that the player nominates those abilities to be problematic during character
Right.
generation. So you're signing up to be attacked by those attributes. It's not. It's not a.
Mhm.
It's not something that's seized upon later.
Right.
Uh,
And so, especially in an NPC character who's not labeled as problematic, that's really what we're talking about. I mean,
I
Mhm.
think so. Yeah.
diamonds is the obvious example, but there are lots and lots of others too.
Mhm.
And so the question is, which is Alex raised in the email, which I thought was a pretty interesting point. The attacking player, let's say for the moment that they go ahead and grab one of those NPCs, and to keep the conversation as clean as possible, let's make it it's not tagged as problematic.
Okay.
It's
Mhm.
and so with with that in hand, the question is whether the attacking player can assign that NPC motivations, or whether they just tag it and then turn it over to the GM, who's probably been playing that character anyway, or would be playing them if they were just brought in anyway. Because remember, it's the GM who plays the NPCs.
Okay.
Mhm.
So, and this leads us to some of the questions from, for example, Trollbabe. I learned the relationship mechanics
Mhm.
for Trollbabe, or rather, I developed them. They're their own thing, but I developed them from the relationship mechanics in Hero Wars,
Mhm.
and I developed them from the way we played those. And I remember, I'm going to brag, I'm talking on the phone with Greg Stafford in one of our basically weekly conversations that we had for a while there. And yeah, publishing a game buys you a whole lot of fun if you use it. And so and we're playing Hero Wars, and I'm basically consulting with Greg as we play along. It's one of the reasons why I feel I'm pretty arrogant about my Hero Wars game. but um, but well, the reason I bring it up is that I talked about the way that we used those relationships when one character in a dangerous situation was grubbing for augment bonuses like you do in Hero Wars. And I don't remember if she used it as an augment or whether she just said, I'm flat out using it. She named her relationship character and said, he shows up. I'm using him
Hmm.
Mhm.
for the defending ability or whatever it was.
Okay.
And I said, look, Greg, look what this player did. And he said, wow, that is a great use of a relationship. Kind of in a surprise, wow, never seen that before kind of way. And I said to myself, sounds like a primary mechanic for a game I need to write one day. So that's kind of where the Trollbabe mechanics came in with their associated kind of directorial control over those characters. And the reason I bring that up is that I made up rules for Trollbabe after playtesting it all kinds of ways. I made up the
Mhm.
rule that the player, now granted, we're talking about a player owns the relationship. Another player cannot jump in and seize the relationship like we're talking about here. But in Trollbabe, the important thing I'm trying to get at is that the player says always what the relationship character actually does.
Mhm.
But the GM plays the relationship character's opinion.
Mhm. Yeah.
So therefore, the Trollbabe can say, stand watch all night. And the relationship character says, oh, fuck you. And the Trollbabe player says, no, really, go do it. And the guy, of course, by definition, he is. We all know that. But I say he goes off grumbling.
Mhm.
So this could be kind of interesting in a similar way. Because so far, we've had the GM play the non-player characters, the relationship characters along those lines. I kind of stepped into Trollbabe GM mode.
Mhm.
Okay.
Even if you're using your brother as an ability, you'll notice that I've been providing the brother's dialogue, perspective, and things like that. Although a couple of times you've talked about the backstory too.
Hmm.
So there's some interesting, we got to kind of figure it out a little bit for this game. But I think something along the lines of the GM can never say, no, the GM never says, oh no, you can't use your relationship. They aren't going to do it. The GM
Mhm.
doesn't do that. He can't. But the GM comes up with the reasons for why they do, at least from the inside their heads, comes up with the reasons for what they do when you say they do something.
Mhm.
So in the case of let's say Alex uses Morgan's non-player character to be problematic for him,
Hmm.
the GM, it's on the GM to play the character appropriately so that, for example, they were mind controlled by somebody. Or,
Okay.
for example, they
And that's
misunderstood
for
something.
everything.
The classic one is they misunderstood something.
Mhm.
They're working with bad information. Or Something, in other words, it's up to the GM to make sure that the NPC isn't turned into an adversary when there was no indication thereof.
Okay.
And so that might, I'm not sure if it entirely manages everything, because players should still have a lot of input on their relationships and the nature of what's gone on between the characters until now, all kinds of other backstory stuff. So there has to be some work, there has to be some cooperation. But I think the attacking player can kick it to the GM and say, yeah, we have no idea why that relationship would ever attack you, but I'm going to set up something either difficult or easy for you to say why. You know, but I mean, the trouble is that, I mean, if it's totally out of left field, you know, Diamonds attacks Zebediah with a knife. You know, that seems to me as though it's breaking what we've established.
Yeah, she will never use a knife. She's like, she will make the plant explode or something.
Not quite what I meant, I have. But do you guys kind of see where I'm getting at? Yeah. There's something, but there's a solution there. There's some elegant way to state it. There's some elegant way to state it, the same elegant way that I use for Trollbabe, so that there's just no confusion. Nobody in playing Trollbabe has ever had a problem with those rules, given what I said in it. They say, oh, and from that point on, all the diverse ways of handling it are possible, but the baseline of how to do it is established. So hitting upon that is what we're after here, even if it's not identical, because there's 3 players involved, not 2. There's a possibility to make that work. Does that make any sense, Alex, especially?
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm
I mean, I think in our last game, I used the being of pure energy, which I don't think had anything problematic on it at all, and I actually did give the reason why that was going. It sounds like I mean, that's not a character; it's an ability,
right?
But it sounds like the same thing would fit there, where I would say, well, I think it makes total sense for the being of pure energy to oppose that. I guess maybe even I can say but the GM gets to decide what exactly is going on.
In the original hero, in the Hero Quest, there are 3 abilities which are designated as flaws. And those are the ones that are often used as penalties, or perhaps even opposing abilities in certain circumstances. And so, but none of the others are flaws. Whereas here, I said, well, instead of designating 3 separate flaws, let's just make 3 abilities which you can ordinarily use. Let's make them flawed. And therefore you can use them in this way. And then as we continued to play, it was more fun just to grab whatever made sense.
Yeah, honestly, like, yeah.
And so, so in many ways, I just designated that everything on your sheet is flawed.
I think that's pretty cool.
That's the life of a cosmic superhero.
True. Yeah, I was going to say. I mean, it's not like it doesn't fit. It is helpful to have those 3 things to start, because it gives you a little handle, right?
Yeah.
So the question is whether we keep that or not. If we do, an interesting possibility occurs to me that those are special in some way. They can really be grabbed, not just ordinarily grabbed, but really grabbed somehow. And furthermore, that if you really want it to be nasty, and this is just spitballing, you can pay a hero point to add a flawed addition to someone else's ability. If that flawed additional statement has mechanical weight, which we haven't made up yet, But if it does, then the ability to designate something as such strikes me. I mean, if we're going to get really aggressive about fucking with everyone else's sheet, that would be a very aggressive way to do it. I don't know if I quite approve of it, but it occurs to me.
Yeah. Um,
Well, maybe
I-
if you had a strong victory in a conflict against the
Right.
other character.
That could be a consequence, right? Instead of a penalty, that's one of your choices for doing damage.
Yeah,
Is to add that
would be
flaw.
good.
That's a really good idea, actually. I kind of like this because I like the idea of people like really struggling to win, you know? And so don't settle. Don't settle for your fucking marginal victories anymore. Yeah, we know the dice will give us marginal victories all over the place. I want people like you guys did in the last session, you know, really screwing it in to try and get the as complete a victory as possible. This is another reason to do it. Not
mhm.
because you're really, and I like it. You're not really trying to hurt the other player. What you are doing is really altering the whole shared landscape of all these abilities. And
Mhm.
and I kind of like that. And people will fight for the abilities that they want to keep pure. So yes.
I'm kind
Yeah,
of.
I think there's
don't-
definitely. Oh, go
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. I kind of wonder. Maybe worried isn't the word, but I wonder if this couldn't transmute into blood opera.
I
very
agree.
quickly, like
Yeah.
in given the right or the wrong group, depending on how you look at it.
I agree, and it's a good question. If everybody invests in to take one way to go, if everybody invests in an adversarial NPC,
Mhm.
and everybody invests, and pretty soon you're going to see all these abilities across everybody's sheet that represent this one person that all the characters are trying to stop. And I just love the fact that it's manifested as abilities on everybody's sheet, but that's just me. And so, you have that. Then we're avoiding that because everybody's investing in screwing each other as players, but it's through the agency of this dreadful NPC. So we're actually also enjoying as we go along the fact that we can make this guy worse and worse and worse.
Okay.
And that's great. So that's not really blood opera in the bad sense, but you're right. If on the other hand what we're doing is basically playing mutual screw you to everybody. And notice that victories are already hammering people's abilities down into the dirt in many cases.
Well, yeah, I mean that was the thing that with realizing that both sides get impacted. If you use something off somebody's own sheet to attack them, they're gonna lose.
Right. They're going to lose something. Yeah.
So that's just fundamentally, if you make that choice, you are doing something that will have a negative impact on that character.
Yeah, and so it's so yes, the sort of I do like the idea of maintaining sort of the playful irresponsibility of it all so that when that happens it's just what happens. And yet you're right. I mean that's kind of what we have to look out for in a situation like that. I'm avoiding using the word GM for the attacking player. It's it's too much, you know. The word just has too much baggage and too much. People will assume things that are not in their power, and then you have people saying, "Well, I don't like games where everybody's the GM," but they'll play the exact same mechanics if you just don't call it the GM.
Yeah, you should probably call it something silly, comic related, like the drawer or the person who's throwing or something like that.
Right. Well, you would say
Illustrator.
You could say this
The illustrator, yeah.
or this person is the watcher.
Something like that.
Right. You see what I mean? Yeah, something. Or maybe the
Yeah.
GM is the watcher, and then these people are, I don't know. When you're the agent, when you're the fate, right? When you're the fate.
No, I like the idea of the illustrator because we always talk about draw the big multi-panel
Right.
whatever.
Yeah, it's a good question. Actually, it's kind of funny. No, the receiving player is the illustrator because they frame the scene,
Oh yeah,
and
Yeah.
and so the other player
it's the
it's
writer,
like the writer.
right?
Exactly. It's the writer. He's the one who's fucking it all up. He's the one who's like, the artist is like, I just drew the pretty thing. Now I have to do what?
This cat is doing what?
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, wait a minute. I have to draw Armada, Space Armada, attacking? Fuck, man. I just drew the planet.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, it's
that's
interesting.
funny.
It's interesting, though. I just realized in that situation where you're using, you forced abilities on the sheet against each other. The option that the player of that character has is to try and keep it all marginal.
Right. If you got your stuff on your stuff, if you take a marginal defeat or victory, basically.
Yeah, you want to keep it
if
marginal.
you get the margin, whatever on the sheet gets the marginal defeat gets a -3, but that's the worst that happens. That's it. Nothing else.
If
And
you
the other side will get a +3. So you're keeping
well,
it.
actually, no, it's asymmetrical.
Yeah, I was
The
wondering
other
about
side
that.
won't get that.
Yeah, that's the thing that is a little bit.
It's one of the reasons why. So yes, no matter, you're going to lose if you get a marginal victory / defeat with your ability against your ability. One of them is going down by 3%, by 3
Yeah.
points.
not if you use your ability to defend the same ability.
If you use the same ability to defend, then yeah, you're right.
Ah.
Yeah.
Well, hang on. What happens if you use the same ability to defend?
Tell you the truth, I don't know. I'll have to, but it's
not +3 and -6, so it works out to a -3.
That's true.
So
But that's
far,
better than a
That
-6.
seems like a bit like contrive.
damn it. Now I'm looking into the infinite mirror of cosmic understanding.
Yeah.
No, it's the cosmic mirror of infinite understanding. That sounds better somehow.
Yeah.
If there is an asymmetry in the the numeric modifiers in complex, though, would it have the effect over time of just driving all the numbers to 0?
Well,
I mean, you
I
do
don't
get
know.
and you can use the hero points to boost abilities back, and you can use them to add new abilities. So maybe that averages out to the same level.
I think that part of the assumption of this kind of game, and I'm talking about Hero Quest stuff in general, is that you really are aiming at climactic events.
Mhm.
Sooner or later, I mean, there's an emergent chapter structure in playing Hero Quest,
Okay.
even though you don't designate it as a chapter ahead of time, like you do in you guys, what's the name? The Wrath of the Autarch? Isn't that one of the games that's out? Philip
Yeah,
Morris?
I've seen
I
that
just
name.
chose that because he has that separated into incredibly distinct chapters, each of which it's a little bit like that game by Vincent and Meg, where you choose what kind of mechanics you're using.
Yeah, the
chapter.
King is Dead, Firebrands, all those.
Yeah, so this game is very similar, and in it, but that's what I mean. I mean, you've got a chapter, and that chapter has this set of roles in it, and it's got its ending and beginning, and I mean, it is fixed. Whereas in this kind of game, you don't, and I don't mean just Cosmic Zap, I mean in Hero Quest, you don't have that, but you have very designated, dramatically driven senses of chapters. For example, for extended contests, which we haven't done, for extended contests, you have two kinds of consequences in terms of the numbers, what happens to the numbers, and what happens to the characters. And you just designate whether the GM thinks this particular extended conflict is part of rising action or whether it's climactic. And if it's climactic, the consequences are far more dire. The very same numerical outcome has characters being killed, whereas in rising action, they wouldn't be. So Hero Quest has in it a sense of your perception of where you are in a satisfying arc, and it has mechanical consequences.
Mhm.
So what I'm trying to say, Morgan, is that if you play with that kind of approach, you would finish. And I think it would not just be a mechanical grinds down until we're all done. I think something would be done before that.
Okay.
Mhm.
Is the idea. Numerically, I'm not sure if it would anyway, just for the
Okay.
reasons you said, but just in case, there's supposed to be another aesthetic standard at work to
Okay.
determine endings.
Mhm.
Well, there's also, not every action is the other player picks an ability to oppose
Right. It's
you.
not every
There's
one.
also just I'm going to try and do something, and the GM sets an obstacle.
Right. Those difficulties
that-
are in there, and those if you win them, they just pump you up,
Yeah.
right.
Well,
and you're not going to lose anything if you lose.
Yeah, I mean that is the one thing that I in thinking about it that I had noticed is, you always open by, your character is using this ability to try and do something,
Mhm.
and then depending upon what the attacking player chooses, that may be just entirely moot.
Exactly. That ability just
it
gets
becomes
shoved to the side for a little bit because you're busy with this other shit.
because they
Yeah.
decide to target something else,
Right.
and you decide to defend with something else.
Right.
And at least in our play, you don't always even come back to whatever
Except
it was
I've
that you
noticed
started
that
doing.
any number of people several times, and I personally find this very satisfying. They say, now that all that shit's done,
Mhm.
I want to get back to what I was doing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And then they do, and in many cases, that's just a difficulty roll.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I find that very satisfying. I think that's kind of neat. I don't have a problem with that. And and then of course it doesn't even have to be that ability. Let's say due to the new circumstances, there's something else they want to do, which is eligible for a difficulty style roll.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
And
guess
then
the
that's fine. But I think
Yeah,
we
I
ought
guess
to we ought to remember that the players, every player ought to remember that they can always just do what they want in a non-adversarial circumstance and get a roll out.
yeah.
They can.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think probably in my where I run into problems is the thing that I was starting to do sort of kind of vaguely muddily got resolved in the other resolution too. And so I didn't get back to it. And if I had just gotten back to it, I would have been fine. So
Mhm.
I think you're right to just, as long as people remember to think about, okay, so go back to the beginning. Is that really handled, or do you need to say something more to the GM? And
Which
and
you're
then,
allowed to do.
yeah.
At that point, you kind
Yeah.
of have rider status at that point of
Yeah.
saying, well, and now we'll stick with my guy for a few more pages.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I definitely do need, more Cosmic Zap playtesting to see what other people make of this.
Mhm.
Because,
Yeah, and it's not always easy to be a play tester. I mean, it's hard to know, should I go through the document that Ron wrote and try and figure out what makes sense and doesn't make sense?
especially
should I just
as
show
the
up?
minute
I
then
just
in
show
the
up
middle
and
of play,
play?
he says, "Oh, screw that bullshit! I changed that
Yeah.
hours ago."
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I
Hours,
remember.
man, hours ago. Where have you been?
I remember when I played with Ron the Villa game, that session.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, so excited about trying this game, and I read the game draft and all that, and then we started playing. He was like, yeah, I don't know, I'm changing this as we go, so don't worry. I'm like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, it does have a tendency to wiggle under the knife. That's for